This is Riley Meave reporting from the Wellington Historical Society. I'm here with a teacher, James Marshall, at Wellington High School. How long have you been working here at Wellington High School as a teacher?
Started in 1988. That first year, 88, 89, we actually were in what is currently Bach Middle School. They had closed down a high school, and Wellington went into that site. It's downtown. It's actually in Northwest Palm. And for 1 year, we were there while they were building this school. So starting from 88, 89 until now, this is my 31st year at Wellington.
And that was the first year's Wellington
Yes,
High School.
I'm one of the original teachers. There's 5 of us that are left that are original teachers from that first year.
And what have been your various roles over those 30 years working here?
Well, I started out just as a marine biology teacher. I was hired to teach marine science, and during the course of that, I was able to develop an honors marine curriculum, a Marine 2 class, and then I became the science department chair a few years after I was here. Did that for a while. Got the opportunity to become activities director. With that, I oversaw all of the non-athletic clubs and associations and so forth on campus. Did that with part-time teaching. Then somewhere in the mix there, I was the assistant athletic director for a while. Then I became the academy coordinator about 13, 14 years ago, and oversaw starting the Fire Academy and the Fine Arts Academy, and inherited the Equine Academy and the Marketing Academy and drafting. And then most recently, I've taken over the job as 9th grade dean. So I handle a lot of the discipline for the 9th graders. So I think that's about it, with some coaching in there sprinkled in as well.
Yeah, so you've been involved in basically every facet of the school.
Yeah, that's been the really cool thing about it, is that I've seen a lot of different sides of it, and both the extracurricular side, the academic side, the administration side. So yeah, I've been pretty involved in all aspects of the school.
Yeah, so Wellington High School was the first high school for Wellington, so we are still a relatively new community. And what was it like when you first got here? What was the culture of the village like physically, and the school as well?
Very different. One thing that's interesting is, we look at Wellington now as being kind of a village school, and we're set in the older part of the village, in the western part of it, and this is where the village first started out in this area. But when we first started back in 1988 and the early 90s, we were a western community school. We serviced all of Loxahatchee. We serviced a good chunk of the acreage. Like we do now, we went all the way out on southern, our boundary went out to 20 Mile Bend. But we were far more than a village school at that point in time. Our footprint was huge. Our boundary went in a very large area, and we've split off from there Seminole Ridge High School, Royal Palm Beach High School, and Palm Beach Central. So actually now, we're actually more of a village school than we actually were back then. Some of the differences, besides the fact that it was a huge geographic area that attended the school, long transit times. I remember giving kids rides home back in the early 90s that lived way out in the western portions of Loxahatchee, and it was literally from this area, it was a 35, 40-minute drive out to their homes to get them dropped off after field trips and so forth. So we've shrunk our footprint quite a bit. We've changed a lot too in our student body and our student population. We're much more of I would say, have a global look to us now. A lot more diversity, which has really enriched us. And I know, that's kind of a piece of what we're looking at coming up here. I'm going to get off script here a little bit. So I don't know if you want me to go into that now or how you want to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go what do you think?
Okay. The diversity piece is something that's really been interesting. You run into folks that lament the old days, in the days when we did have less diversity. And, we had different challenges back in those days than we do now. But I think we produce a product, and by product I mean the student now, that has much more of a global connection. We have many different cultures here at Wellington High School now. We celebrate those cultures. It enriches us. If you look at our academics, when we first started, we had a few AP classes. We had a couple of AP English classes. We had AP Biology. We had AP Calculus. There was a few others sprinkled in. Now we offer over 40 college classes with both the AP and the ACE program. So the college prep piece of it is much stronger now than it's ever been in the past. But it's interesting, some folks will look and say, well, Wellington has changed. It's more diverse. What is our school like? And the reality is we're a stronger, more connected school. We produce a better product that is prepared for a global environment, and we're doing a much better job of preparing kids for the college setting. They come out of here with many college classes. So it's actually changed to be stronger academically at the same time that we've added in all the cultural diversity to the school as well as our population has changed.
Yeah, so going off the idea of diversity in our more academically challenging environment, how do you feel that the student body of Wellington High School parallels with what is going on in Wellington's community?
Wellington is becoming a city. It was initially, we call a suburb or bedroom community. And I'm talking the non-equestrian part, and we'll get to that in a second because that's a huge link to what Wellington is. But from the standpoint of being a suburb of West Palm, basically, we started out as just that. Now Wellington is its own entity. It's obviously has been a village since 1996. But with that comes all the benefits and some of the heartache from that as well. We struggle sometimes in the village with some of the areas that are a little more run down. We try to develop programs to beautification for those areas. So we've got some of those challenges. I think if you look at some of the crime stats, Wellington is still a wonderful place to live with low crime, but we've had some challenges there as the community has grown. But the piece that has been consistent and I think really sets Wellington apart from a lot of other communities is the equestrian link. I just met with a gentleman the other day who happens to be a parent, one of our ninth graders, and he was telling me about the original Wellington back in the early 1970s and how it was largely surrounded by polo and the equestrian, the dressage, and hunter jumper and so forth. And it was interesting that we talked about how it changed relative to kind of becoming this bedroom community. So now we have this kind of this duality going on. We still have the strong equestrian area, winter equestrian capital of the world, but we have this vastly, rapidly growing suburban population here. And so the challenges that the village has had, and I think we're doing a really good job with it, is to kind of interrelate those two entities. But the equestrian community is what makes Wellington special. It makes it different than, say, a Parkland or other western communities down in Broward County, is having this equestrian link.
Something, the environment of Wellington, that's something that attracted you to the community, doing outdoor activities, having areas like the Wellington Preserve.
Absolutely, and the village has done an outstanding job in that. Bing's Forest was a preserve that was set aside early on. But since that point in time, we've developed tremendous green space, park space, and the preserve out on Flying Cow Road was just an absolute home run. What a great, amazing location. And, we have to be honest with ourselves, much of this area was either Cypress Strand or Everglades proper years ago. So we've kind of, in the origin of Wellington, it's kind of done a certain amount of environmental damage. Way back a number of years ago. So, it's up to us now in the village to kind of rectify some of that and to keep as much land as possible as greenscape. And, one of the big projects in the future is for Wellington and other cities to connect some of their green space together, what we call greenways. So actually we have pathways for organisms to move from community to community. I give Wellington a lot of credit, and I give the leaders of Wellington a lot of credit that has been an important thing. That has been something they've wanted to put resources into, and they continue to do that to this day. So, my hope is that as we move forward in 30 years from now, when, the Historical Society is talking to some other teacher or educator or person in the community, that they can look back and say, okay, the first 20 years of the village that was started, but this was continued, and we continue that pathway to keep a strong environment that is part of what Wellington is.
Yeah, well, talking about our future, my last question regards the reason you elected to be part of the Oral History Project. Why do you feel it's important to document and understand Wellington's past, even though some might consider us a relatively new community?
History lives in each of us, and as people pass away or move out of the area, they take a little bit of that history with them. And this is why I'm so excited about this project, is it gets down in video or words and statements kind of the experiences people have had here. And those experiences then are added onto and connected, and it becomes part of the foundation to move forward. Don't quite know exactly how it all got started with the Historical Society, but I give folks great credit for doing it, because it's a story that needs to be told. You know, when you go back and you look at even at the time that I started here at Wellington in the 1980s, which is well after some of my friends have been here and moved here. I have one group of friends that actually came out in a four-wheel drive vehicle in 1973, and they went over real rough sand roads and got to what is now Chatsworth Village, right across from the school, to look at a lot that they purchased on Lake Wellington. And it was just, they were out in the wilds at that point in time. Well, I came along, 10, 14 years after that. But even back in the 80s, Forest Hill was a two-lane road coming out with cows on the side. When we wanted to go out to a restaurant, we had, cobblestones and a place called Jalapeno Harry's, and Backstreets was there at the time, but virtually very few options. If we wanted to do shopping, we had to go in town. I mean, really, it is just amazing how this community has changed and how it's grown. And there's pros and cons to that, but it's been an interesting change. And if we don't document that, and we don't have folks that talk about their experiences with it, that's lost forever.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today and being part of the Oral History Project.
Roddy, thank you for inviting me to do this. This has been important to me, and I think your works are admirable, and I hope the whole group moves forward and continues this for years to come.
Thank you.
Okay.